The Neutron's Edge was exactly the kind of establishment Valera had been seeking, dingy enough to loosen tongues, yet respectable enough that she wouldn't need to worry about becoming someone's dinner. The bar occupied a prominent corner of Orbital Platform 9, one of the busiest trading hubs in this sector of the galaxy. As she navigated through the crowded space, her three sensory appendages swiveled independently, capturing the complex tapestry of sounds, scents, and electromagnetic signatures that filled the establishment. Species from across the Galactic Council mingled here, some that had been interstellar travelers for millennia, others that had only recently joined the community of spacefaring civilizations. Humans fell into the latter category, having been council members for merely a few decades. Yet somehow, in that brief span, they had managed to become disproportionately influential. Valera had been a senior correspondent for Galactic Perspectives long enough to recognize when a story warranted further investigation. The rumor that had brought her to this particular establishment was, on its face, preposterous. The humans had somehow subdued the Vrexner, the most feared predatory species in the known galaxy, with nothing more than a slap. Even more absurdly, the incident had apparently led to an alliance that had reshaped galactic politics. Her editor had laughed when she proposed investigating the tale. "Valera," he had said, his voice modulator vibrating with amusement. "If you want to chase fairy tales, at least pick one that doesn't involve the Vrexner. Those beasts were carving up entire worlds before most council species had discovered fire." But Valera prided herself on her thoroughness, and the story had now surfaced in too many unrelated sources to be dismissed entirely. If there was even a kernel of truth to it, uncovering it would make for a compelling feature. Her target sat in a shadowy alcove near the back of the bar. Kresnik was a Silthian veteran who, according to her research, had been present at Proxima Station during the legendary SLAP incident. His three eye stalks twitched nervously as she approached, and the chromatophores beneath his translucent skin shifted to a wary orange. "Mind if I join you?" Valera asked, sliding into the seat opposite him without waiting for a response. "I'm told you were at Proxima Station." Kresnik's middle eye stalk focused intently on her, while the other two continued their restless scanning of the bar. He took a long pull from a container of fermented root juice before answering. "Depends on who's asking," he said finally, his voice a dry rasp. Valera placed her credentials on the table. "Valera, senior correspondent with Galactic Perspectives. I'm researching an incident that supposedly occurred at Proxima about 5 standard cycles ago." The orange beneath Kresnik's skin deepened to an alarming red. "You mean the human?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Valera confirmed. "Commander Olivia Parker, if my sources are correct." Kresnik's three eyes blinked in rapid, unsynchronized succession, a Silthian expression of distress. "What do you want to know about it?" "Everything," Valera said simply, starting with whether it actually happened the way people claim. The veteran took another long drink. "You think we made it up? That the mighty Vrexner would voluntarily partner with the Council after centuries of hostility because of some fabrication?" "I think stories tend to grow in the telling," Valera replied diplomatically, "especially stories involving humans. They've developed quite a mystique since joining the Council." "Mystique," Kresnik repeated, his voice tinged with what might have been fear. "Is that what you call it?" "I call it terrifying. I was there, in the same room. I saw what happened." Valera activated her recording device discreetly. "Tell me." The Vrexner arrived first at Proxima. It was the first diplomatic contact after centuries of raids and territorial conflicts. The whole station was on edge. These weren't just any aggressive species. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. Their fleet had annihilated entire defensive armadas. Their ground forces were practically unstoppable. Kresnik's skin had taken on a mottled pattern now, stress indicators flashing across his epidermis. The human delegation arrived later. They were relative newcomers to interstellar politics, inexperienced, considered physically weak by most council standards. The Vrexner commander, Razor Fong, she was called then, she barely acknowledged them during the initial negotiations. And then, Valera prompted when Kresnik fell silent. Then came the reception. Standard diplomatic protocol. Multiple species, food, drink. The humans stood together. Their Ambassador Washington, Commander Blake, Officer Parker, and their science advisor, Dr. Fuentes. Everything seemed to be proceeding normally, though the tension was palpable. Kresnik's middle eye fixed on some distant point, as if seeing the scene replay. One of the Vrexner warriors, Grashtak, began displaying predatory attention toward Parker. You have to understand, the Vrexner don't just kill for territory or resources. The hunt is fundamental to their psychology, and humans, being unfamiliar, registered as potential prey. Valera nodded. She had researched enough about Vrexner biology to understand the implication. It happened so fast, Kresnik continued. Grashtak lunged toward Ambassador Washington. Whether it was a genuine attack or simply intimidation, I couldn't say. But Parker reacted instantly. She stepped forward and, his voice dropped to a whisper, she slapped him, open-handed, right across the face. Despite herself, Valera couldn't suppress a skeptical click. A slap? Against a Vrexner? They have natural armor plating. Yes, Kresnik hissed. That's what made it so shocking. It wasn't the physical impact, it was practically nothing to a Vrexner. But Parker looked directly into his eyes afterward and said just 2 words, sit down. And he did, Kresnik said, still sounding bewildered after all this time. A Vrexner warrior, a member of a species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, sat down like an obedient pet. The entire room went silent. You could feel the collective shock. Valera's journalistic instincts were on high alert. This aligned with what she'd heard, but still seemed impossible. What happened next? Razor Fong ordered Grashtak to withdraw. The humans continued as if nothing unusual had occurred. But everything had changed. The next day, the Vrexner agreed to terms that were substantially favorable to the Council, terms they had rejected outright in previous negotiations. That's it. One slap changed interspecies relations forever. Valera couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Kresnik's skin rippled with a pattern she couldn't interpret. Not just the slap. Afterward, Razor Fong specifically requested human advisors for certain Vrexner units. That's when I first heard about something called the Taming Protocol. Taming Protocol? Valera repeated. Classified Council business, Kresnik said. But the results speak for themselves. The most aggressive species in known space now fights alongside Council forces. And it all began with that human, Parker. Before Valera could press for more details, Kresnik's communication device emitted an urgent signal. He checked it and immediately began gathering his belongings. I have to go, he said, already rising. Emergency recall. Wait, Valera said quickly. How can I find Parker? Kresnik paused briefly. Last I heard, she was stationed at Europa Outpost. But they don't welcome journalists. He hesitated, then added, if you do manage to get an audience, tell her Kresnik sent you. It might help. With that, he was gone, leaving Valera with a story that seemed too fantastical to be true, yet too specific to be entirely fictional. She ordered a drink and began planning her journey to Europa Outpost. One way or another, she would find Commander Olivia Parker and discover the truth behind this taming protocol. If humans had indeed found a way to pacify the galaxy's most dangerous predators with a mere slap, that wasn't just a story. It was potentially the most significant development in interspecies relations since the founding of the Council itself. The journey to Europa Outpost took Valera through 3 jump points and past a security checkpoint that seemed designed specifically to discourage visitors. Throughout the trip, she reviewed the limited information available about the Proxima Station incident. The official records were sparse: a diplomatic summit, successful negotiations, the beginning of Vrexner integration into Council operations. Nothing about a slap, nothing about Commander Parker's role, nothing about any taming protocol. But there were gaps in the timeline, redacted sections in the publicly available reports, and curious omissions that stood out to her experienced eye. As her small transport approached Jupiter's ice-covered moon, Valera watched the massive human military installation come into view. Europa Outpost was an impressive complex, part research station, part military base, built both on and under the moon's thick ice shell. Getting permission to land had required calling in several favors, and even then, she'd been granted only a 24-hour visitor pass. After docking, Valera was escorted through a series of security checkpoints by stern-faced human officers who seemed distinctly unimpressed by her credentials as a journalist. When she inquired about meeting with Commander Parker, she was informed that the commander was engaged in specialized training exercises and unavailable for interviews. "It's important," Valera insisted to the young lieutenant who had been assigned as her escort. "I've traveled a considerable distance specifically to speak with her about the Proxima Station incident." The lieutenant's expression didn't change. "I'm not familiar with any incident at Proxima Station that would warrant journalistic interest, ma'am. Commander Parker oversees joint training operations here and has a full schedule." Valera decided to play her one card. "Please tell her that Kresnik sent me." The lieutenant's eyebrows rose slightly, the first real reaction Valera had seen from him. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared through a secure door. While waiting, Valera took the opportunity to observe the base. What immediately struck her was something she hadn't expected: Vrexner. At least a dozen of the massive, reptilian warriors moved purposefully through the facility, working alongside human personnel. They wore modified Council military insignia that combined human and Vrexner symbols. More surprising than their presence was their demeanor: focused, disciplined, none of the barely contained aggression that characterized most accounts of Vrexner behavior. The lieutenant returned after several minutes. "Commander Parker will see you," he said, sounding slightly surprised himself. "Follow me." He led her deeper into the facility, finally stopping at a training observation deck overlooking a massive simulated combat arena. Through the transparent barrier, Valera could see teams of humans and Vrexner engaged in what appeared to be coordinated combat exercises against mechanized opponents. "The commander will join you shortly," the lieutenant said before departing. Valera watched, fascinated, as the mixed-species squads executed complex maneuvers with remarkable synchronization. The Vrexner provided overwhelming force at critical points, while the humans directed overall strategy and handled technical aspects of the operation. It was unlike anything she had observed in her extensive coverage of military affairs. "Impressive, isn't it?" The voice came from behind her. Valera turned to find herself face to face with Commander Olivia Parker. The human was tall for her species, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they fell upon. She moved with the confident grace of someone thoroughly comfortable in her own skin, and though she wasn't physically imposing by intergalactic standards, there was something about her presence that commanded attention. "Commander Parker," Valera said, extending a greeting appendage. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I'm Valera, with Galactic Perspectives." "You mentioned Kresnik," Parker said, accepting the greeting briefly before turning her attention back to the training exercise. "He was at Proxima, one of the few non-humans who saw what happened and understood its significance." "That's actually why I'm here," Valera said. "I'm researching what occurred at Proxima Station, specifically the incident between you and the Vrexner warrior Grashtak." Parker's expression remained neutral. "You've come a long way for a story that's mostly become a tall tale at this point. So it didn't happen as described?" Valera asked, disappointment creeping into her voice. "I didn't say that," Parker replied. She watched the exercises for a moment longer, then seemed to come to a decision. "Let's go somewhere we can talk properly. But I'll need you to deactivate any recording devices for parts of our conversation. Some aspects of what we'll discuss fall under Council security protocols." Parker led her to a small conference room with a viewport overlooking Europa's ice-covered surface. After they were seated, Valera reluctantly disabled her recording equipment. "So," Parker said, leaning back in her chair, "you want to know if I really slapped the most dangerous predator in the galaxy into submission?" "Did you?" Valera asked directly. A slight smile touched Parker's lips. "Yes and no. I did slap Grashtak, and I did tell him to sit down. And yes, to everyone's surprise, including my own, he complied. But it wasn't magic, and it wasn't some unique human superpower. It was evolutionary convergence." "I don't understand," Valera admitted. Human beings evolved alongside predators on Earth, Parker explained. For most of our history, we weren't at the top of the food chain. We had to develop strategies to survive. One of those strategies was domestication, forming mutually beneficial relationships with predator species. Like your canine companions, Valera said, recalling her research on human history. Exactly. Wolves, the ancestors of dogs, were apex predators in many Earth ecosystems. Yet somehow, prehistoric humans managed to form alliances with them. Not through overwhelming force, but through an understanding of pack dynamics and establishing what you might call alpha status through confidence, body language, and tone of voice. Parker leaned forward. What we discovered at Proxima, quite by accident, is that Vrexner, social structures, and psychology have remarkable parallels to Earth's pack predators. They respond to the same signals of dominance and submission that worked on Earth's wolves thousands of years ago. So the slap, Valera began, was a dominance display, Parker confirmed. Not about physical harm. Vrexner barely feels such impacts through their armor plating, but about establishing boundaries and hierarchy. Combined with direct eye contact and a commanding tone, it triggered deep-seated instinctual responses. Valera's sensory appendages quivered with excitement. This was far more fascinating than the simple tale of human exceptionalism she'd anticipated. And this led to the taming protocol? She asked. Parker nodded. That's what it came to be called, though I dislike the term. It suggests subjugation, which couldn't be further from the truth. What we developed is a framework for cooperation based on mutual respect and understanding of each other's psychological makeup. But the Vrexner follow human commands, Valera pointed out. They follow human leadership in specific contexts, Parker corrected. Just as early dogs followed human hunting directions while retaining their own agency. The Vrexner remain fully autonomous, with their own culture and decision-making. What we've established is a channel of communication and trust that allows us to work together effectively. Valera considered this. And what do the Vrexner gain from this arrangement? Purpose, community, enhanced effectiveness, Parker listed. Vrexner are natural warriors, but historically they've been hampered by their own aggression and hierarchy contests. Human guidance helps channel their abilities productively while reducing internal conflict. That's not the story I expected, Valera admitted. Reality rarely is, Parker replied. But now you understand why this information has been carefully managed. The actual mechanics of the relationship could be misinterpreted or exploited. Why tell me now? Because, Parker said, her expression growing serious. The Council needs public support for what's coming next. We're facing a new threat at the edge of Cygnus Arm, a species collective we're calling the Harvesters. They've already overwhelmed several outposts. The Council is deploying a joint human Vrexner task force to contain them. And for the first time, we're implementing the taming protocol at full military scale. Valera's journalistic instincts flared. I want to cover it, she said immediately. Embed with your forces. Parker shook her head. It's a combat operation into unknown territory against a highly dangerous enemy, not a place for civilians. I've covered conflicts before, Valera countered. And this is potentially the most significant military and diplomatic development in Council history. It deserves proper documentation. Before Parker could respond, the door to the conference room slid open. A massive Vrexner entered, larger than those Valera had seen training, with distinctive scarlet markings across her natural armor plates. Despite having spent the last hour discussing Vrexner, Valera couldn't help the instinctive fear response that rippled through her body at the predator's proximity. Commander, the Vrexner said, her voice a low rumble. The final combat simulations are complete. All units show readiness metrics above threshold. Thank you, Razor, Parker replied. Valera, may I introduce Commander Razor Scale, formerly known as Razor Fawn. She leads the Vrexner contingent of our joint force. Valera was momentarily speechless. This was the Vrexner commander from Proxima, the one who had witnessed the legendary slap. Up close, she was even more intimidating than Valera had imagined, easily twice the mass of a human, with powerful limbs and razor-sharp natural weapons that gave her name. "You are the journalist," Razor Scale said, fixing Valera with vertically slitted pupils that seemed to evaluate her potential as both threat and prey simultaneously. "Yes," Valera managed. "I'm researching the partnership between humans and Vrexner." Razor Scale's head tilted slightly. "You wish to observe our campaign against the Harvesters." It wasn't a question, but Valera nodded anyway. "She wants to embed with our forces," Parker explained, "but I've explained that it's too dangerous for civilians." To Valera's surprise, Razor Scale made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Danger is relative, Commander. The Kageb bond is strongest when witnessed." She turned her predatory gaze back to Valera. "You will document our hunt, journalist. The galaxy should see what we have become together." Parker looked as if she wanted to object, but after a moment's consideration, she simply nodded. "We deploy in 6 hours. Lieutenant Hayes will provide you with appropriate gear and brief you on safety protocols." As Razor Scale departed, Valera found her voice again. "Kageb Bond," she asked. "Vrexner term," Parker explained, "roughly translates to hunters sharing the circle. It's a sacred concept in their culture. Warriors who hunt together trust each other with their lives." She stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "If you're coming with us, you should prepare. And Valera, remember that what you're about to witness isn't just a story. It's the future of interspecies cooperation in the face of a threat that concerns us all." As Valera followed Parker out of the conference room, she couldn't help but feel that she had stumbled onto something far more profound than a simple tale of human exceptionalism. Whatever the truth behind that legendary slap, its consequences were about to reshape the galaxy. The fleet that departed Europa Outpost 12 hours later was unlike anything Valera had seen in her extensive journalistic career. Human warships flew in formation with modified Vrexner vessels, their complementary designs suggesting an integration that went beyond mere alliance. From her observation position aboard the command carrier Intrepid, Valera watched crews of both species working together with a synchronicity that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. "Impressive, isn't it?" said a voice beside her. Valera turned to find a human officer, Lieutenant Hayes, the one who had provided her with survival gear and a brief but intense safety orientation. "I've covered Council joint operations before," Valera replied, "but nothing like this. There's usually more separation between species. That's because most Allied operations are exactly that, allies working in parallel," Hayes explained. "This is different. We don't just fight alongside the Vrexner. We fight as unified units." Valera's attention was drawn to a nearby training area where a human sergeant was directing a group of Vrexner warriors through what appeared to be a tactical exercise. The Vrexner, creatures that had once been synonymous with uncontrollable aggression, followed instructions with focused discipline. "It's not what most people expect when they hear about the taming protocol," Hayes continued, noticing her interest. "They imagine the Vrexner as attack dogs or something. The reality is more like battle siblings." "Battle siblings," Valera repeated, finding the term oddly fitting. "Commander Parker doesn't like journalists using the term taming," Hayes added with a slight smile. "Says it misses the point entirely." Before Valera could inquire further, an announcement echoed through the ship. "All personnel, prepare for final jump to Cygnus arm coordinates. Combat alert status in effect upon arrival." Hayes straightened. "That's my cue. You should head to the designated observer station. Remember the safety protocols." The observation deck provided Valera with a protected view of both the bridge operations and the external feed displays. As the fleet prepared for the final jump into potentially hostile territory, she watched Commander Parker and Razor Scale standing side by side at the command station, reviewing tactical projections. The synchronicity of their movements struck Valera. The human and the Vrexner commander appeared to communicate with minimal words, anticipating each other's thoughts and decisions. There was none of the tension or dominance display she might have expected. Instead, they exhibited the easy confidence of long-established partners. When the jump came, It was accompanied by the momentary disorientation that always affected organic beings during faster-than-light transitions. As reality reasserted itself, the tactical displays flooded with information. Multiple hostile contacts detected, announced a sensor officer. Harvester signatures confirmed. They appear to be engaged with the remnants of the Cygnus defense fleet. On the main view screen, Valera could see what had once been a thriving commercial outpost, now surrounded by bizarre organic mechanical vessels that resembled nothing so much as metallic insects. The sight sent a shiver through her sensory appendages. There was something fundamentally wrong about the Harvester's design, as if technology had been fused with biology in ways that violated natural laws. "Deploy strike teams to the station," Parker ordered calmly. "Primary objective is evacuation of survivors. Secondary objective is gathering intelligence on Harvester capabilities and intentions. Vrexner assault units will clear the path," Razor Scale added, her powerful voice carrying across the bridge. "Human tactical teams will secure and extract." The operation unfolded with remarkable efficiency. Vrexner warriors, transported in specialized landing craft, tore through the initial Harvester resistance, while human teams followed with precision weapons and technical expertise. From her observation post, Valera watched the helmet feeds of both species as they pushed through the station, encountering increasingly disturbing evidence of what the Harvesters had done to the station's original inhabitants. "They're not just killing," murmured an analyst nearby, reviewing incoming data. "They're harvesting biological material, integrating it into their technology somehow." The revelation sent a wave of revulsion through the bridge crew, but the joint forces maintained their discipline. As Valera observed, she began to understand the true nature of the taming protocol in action. The humans didn't control the Vrexner through dominance. Rather, they provided the strategic framework and emotional stability that allowed the Vrexner's natural aggression to become precision rather than chaos. Hours into the operation, an urgent communication came from one of the ground teams. "Command, we've encountered heavy resistance at Junction Point Alpha 3. Multiple Harvester elites converging on our position, requesting immediate support." The feed showed Parker's strike team pinned down in what appeared to be a main processing center, surrounded by larger, more heavily armed Harvesters than had been encountered previously. "That's the commander's team," Hayes said, appearing beside Valera again. She insisted on leading the central extraction force herself. On the command deck, Razor Scale's reaction was immediate and visceral. A deep, rumbling growl emerged from her throat, and her posture shifted to one of heightened aggression. "Prepare my personal transport," she ordered, already moving toward the hangar bay. "I will retrieve the commander myself." What followed was a display of combat prowess that Valera knew would be the centerpiece of her reporting. Razor Scale's insertion into the besieged section of the station was like watching a force of nature. The Vrexner commander tore through Harvester forces with primal fury, yet maintained enough tactical awareness to coordinate with the human defenders. When she reached Parker's position, the feed showed the human commander bleeding from shoulder wound, but still directing her team's defense. The moment the two leaders reunited, something remarkable happened. Parker looked up at her Vrexner ally and said something too quiet for the audio to capture. Whatever it was, it caused Razor Scale to visibly modulate her combat rage, not diminishing it, but channeling it with even greater precision. Together, they orchestrated a fighting retreat that successfully extracted not only their team, but several station survivors as well. By the time they returned to the Intrepid, the joint fleet had established dominance in the immediate space around the station, forcing the remaining Harvester vessels to retreat to the system's outer reaches. In the aftermath, Valera was permitted access to the medical bay where Parker was receiving treatment for her injuries. The human commander sat on an examination table, wincing slightly as a medical officer applied regenerative compounds to her wounded shoulder. More surprising was the presence of Razor Scale, looming protectively nearby with an intensity of focus that seemed to exclude awareness of anything else in the room. The Vrexner commander's posture reminded Valera of guardian behaviors she had observed in other species, a far cry from the merciless predator of galactic legend. "Commander," Valera began, approaching carefully. "I witnessed the operation from the observation deck. The coordination between human and Vrexner forces was remarkable." Parker nodded, grimacing slightly as the medical officer finished securing a bandage. "It's what we've been working towards since Proxima. Not just cooperation, but true integration of our capabilities. And limitations," added Razor Scale. "Humans provide direction and restraint. We provide strength and instinct. Is this what you meant by the Kage bond?" Valera asked, the Vrexner's eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "Yes. In our ancient traditions, hunters who shared the circle became as one mind with different bodies, each contributing what the other lacks. I've reported on many interspecies military alliances," Valera said. "None of them achieve this level of synchronicity. That's because most alliances are political constructs," Parker explained. "What we've developed with the Vrexner goes deeper. It's biological, psychological, even spiritual if you want to look at it that way. And it all began with a slap?" Valera couldn't keep the note of disbelief from her voice. To her surprise, Razor Scale made the rumbling sound she now recognized as Vrexner laughter. The slap was merely the moment of recognition. "Your species has a saying, it takes one to know one. Predator recognizing predator," Parker clarified. "Humans don't look dangerous to most species. We lack claws, fangs, natural armor. But the Vrexner recognized something in us, the same relentless drive, the same capacity for both violence and cooperation that defined their own evolution. We saw ourselves in you." Razor Scale confirmed. "Not as you are now, but as you must have been to survive and thrive despite physical limitations." As the medical officer finished and departed, Parker stood carefully testing her injured shoulder. "The important thing to understand, Valera, is that we are not taming the Vrexner. That implies domestication, subjugation. What we've actually created is a meeting of equals who complement each other's natural abilities." "Then why call it the taming protocol at all?" Valera asked. Parker's expression turned rueful. "Council politics. Some species were more comfortable with the idea that we were somehow controlling the Vrexner rather than partnering with them. We let the misconception persist because it served our purposes. And now we need the truth understood," Razor Scale said firmly. "The Harvesters are unlike any threat the Council has faced. They do not negotiate. They do not respect boundaries. They consume and convert. Defeating them will require the full integration of human and Vrexner capabilities, and possibly those of other Council species as well." A communications officer appeared at the doorway. "Commanders, the Council representatives have arrived. They're requesting a full briefing on the Cygnus arm engagement." Parker nodded. "Tell them we'll be there shortly." She turned back to Valera. "You should attend as well. What happens next will be the real story. Not some mythologized slap from years ago, but the future of interspecies cooperation in the face of an existential threat." As they made their way to the briefing room, Valera found herself reflecting on how thoroughly her expectations had been upended. She had come seeking a sensational tale of human exceptionalism, of mysterious abilities that had subdued the galaxy's most feared predators. Instead, she had discovered something far more nuanced and, ultimately, more profound, a story not of taming, but of recognition and respect across the boundaries of evolution and species. The Council representatives had gathered in the Intrepid's main conference chamber, a diverse collection of species, many of whom Valera recognized from her coverage of galactic politics. Their reaction to the joint Human-Vrexner command team was telling. While some greeted Parker and Razor Scale with obvious respect, others couldn't quite hide their unease at the Vrexner commander's presence. "The preliminary reports are concerning," began Counselor Thran, a towering Scythian whose elaborate tentacular appendages quivered with anxiety. "If these harvesters are truly capable of biological assimilation on the scale you describe, they represent a threat to all Council species." "Not just a threat," Parker corrected. An extinction-level event if left unchecked. The Cygnus station was completely overtaken in less than one standard day. Every organic being that was either killed or converted. Valera watched as the implications sank in across the assembled officials. Fear was an interspecies constant, it seemed. Your joint operation was successful in securing the station? Asked another counselor. This one a diminutive Ellerin whose crystalline exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights. We reclaimed the station and drove off the main harvester fleet, Razor Scale confirmed. But they were not defeated, merely reassessing. The intelligence we gathered suggests they operate like a hive organism, Parker added. Individual units appear to share information instantaneously across their collective. Each encounter makes them more adapted to our tactics. Then we must strike decisively before they can adapt further, declared a military representative from one of the Council's founding species. Agreed, said Parker. But conventional military approaches alone won't be sufficient. The Harvester's ability to incorporate biological and technological elements from those they consume means they're constantly evolving new defenses. What do you propose? Counselor Thran asked. Parker and Razor Scale exchanged a glance that conveyed volumes without words. Expansion of the taming protocol, Parker said firmly. Not just human Vrexner units, but integration with other compatible species as well, each bringing their unique evolutionary advantages to bear. The room erupted in overlapping voices, many expressing skepticism or outright rejection of the idea. Valera noted that most of the opposition came from species that had historically suffered at the hands of the Vrexner before their integration with humanity. Silence. Razor Scale's powerful voice cut through the commotion. When order had been restored, she continued more quietly. You fear what you do not understand. You look at my kind and see only the predators who once threatened your worlds. But ask yourselves, what have the Vrexner done since forming Kageb bonds with humans? Your forces have been effective in maintaining border security, admitted the Ellerin counselor reluctantly. More than effective, Parker interjected. Vrexner-human joint units have resolved 17 potentially catastrophic conflicts in the past 3 standard years alone, with 0 civilian casualties. What Commander Parker proposes is not subjugation or control, Razor Scale continued. It is partnership, recognition of complementary strengths. The humans did not tame us, they understood us. And in that understanding, we found common purpose. As the debate continued, Valera found herself fascinated by the dynamics at play. The legendary slap at Proxima Station had not been the end of the story, but its beginning. The first recognition that species need not be locked in eternal competition, that evolutionary differences could become strengths rather than barriers. Hours later, after the council representatives had departed to consider the proposal, Valera found herself alone with Parker and Razor Scale in a quiet observation lounge overlooking the damaged Cygnus station. They'll agree eventually, Parker said, gazing out at the stars. Not because they want to, but because they'll recognize it's necessary. The Harvesters leave no room for traditional politics or old prejudices. You speak with great certainty, Commander, Valera observed. What makes you so confident? Parker smiled faintly. Because fear of the unknown is eventually overcome by the need to survive. It's a pattern we've seen throughout human history, and I suspect it's universal. Razor Scale moved to stand beside her human counterpart, her massive form casting a long shadow across the deck. The Council fears what happened at Proxima Station, she rumbled. They fear that humans possess some mystical power over predator species. And they don't, Valera asked, her journalistic instincts still hunting for the heart of the story. What we possess is a shared evolutionary history, Parker explained. Humans evolved alongside predators, first as prey, then as competitors, finally as partners. That journey gave us insights into predator psychology that most prey species never develop. The slap, Valera began, trying to reconcile the simple act with its profound consequences, was merely a trigger, Razor Scale interrupted, a gesture that spoke directly to instincts older than civilization. Among Vrexner, Such a challenge from a physically inferior being would normally be met with immediate lethal response. But your Commander Parker delivered it with such perfect confidence. The certainty of an alpha predator marking boundaries. Grashtak was confused, Parker added. His instincts told him I should be easy prey, yet everything about my behavior contradicted that assessment. In that moment of confusion, the command to sit registered on a primal level. And change the course of galactic history, Valera mused. Only because both our species were ready for change, Parker said. The Vrexner had reached the limits of what conquest alone could achieve. Humans needed powerful allies in a galaxy far more dangerous than we had initially realized. The incident at Proxima simply catalyzed a partnership that made evolutionary sense for both sides. Valera's sensory appendages quivered with excitement as the pieces fell into place. So the taming protocol isn't about dominance at all. It's about communication across species boundaries, understanding primal signals that transcend language. Precisely, Razor Scale confirmed. What appears as submission to outside observers is actually recognition. My kind do not follow humans because we are controlled. We follow because we recognize in them what we value in ourselves, the hunter's spirit, the pack mentality, the balance of aggression and restraint. As if to demonstrate, the massive Vrexner commander lowered her head slightly toward Parker in a gesture that managed to convey both respect and fierce independence simultaneously. The Harvesters represent the opposite approach to interspecies relations. Parker continued, her expression darkening. They don't seek understanding or cooperation. They simply consume and convert, erasing diversity rather than building upon it. Valera considered this. And you believe this expanded taming protocol, this deeper form of interspecies cooperation, is the answer? It's certainly a better answer than trying to fight them as separate species with separate strategies, Parker replied. The Harvesters adapt too quickly. Our only advantage is the creativity that comes from combining diverse evolutionary perspectives. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Parker checked the message on her device and straightened. The Council has reached a preliminary decision. They want to reconvene immediately. The three returned to the conference chamber where the Council representatives had reassembled. The tension in the room was palpable, but Valera sensed a shift in the atmosphere, anew. Resolve underlying the fear. Counselor Thran spoke first, tentacles rippling in formal patterns. Commander Parker, Commander Scale, after reviewing the evidence from Cygnus Station and consulting with our respective governments, the Council has voted to authorize an expansion of the protocol. The Cynthian seemed to struggle with avoiding the term taming. Subject to certain safeguards and oversight mechanisms, of course. Of course, Parker acknowledged smoothly. Furthermore, continued the Ellerin counselor, we are prepared to commit additional forces to your joint command for the purpose of containing and eventually eliminating the Harvester threat. Razor Scale's posture shifted subtly, a gesture Valera now recognized as pleased surprise. The Vrexner accept this partnership, she said formally. We will hunt alongside all who stand against the Harvesters. There is one additional matter, added a third counselor. The Council believes that public understanding of this initiative is essential to its success. To that end, we would authorize limited media coverage of the operation. All eyes turned to Valera, who suddenly found herself at the center of attention. Assuming appropriate security protocols are observed, Parker agreed. We would welcome transparent reporting on this effort. The people of the Council deserve to know both what threatens them and what defends them. The meeting concluded with the formal establishment of what would be called the Integrated Species Response Force, a careful linguistic sidestep of the more controversial taming protocol terminology. As the representatives filed out, Parker approached Valera. So, the commander said, it seems you'll have your story after all, though perhaps not the one you came looking for. The best stories never are, Valera replied. I came seeking a simple tale of human exceptionalism. How your species mysteriously subdued the most dangerous predators in the galaxy with a slap. Instead, I found something far more complex and, frankly, more hopeful. "And what's that?" Parker asked. "A story about transcending evolutionary boundaries, about finding unexpected common ground across species that evolved in completely different environments." Valera's sensory appendages rippled with excitement. "It's not about taming it all. It's about recognition and respect." Parker smiled. "That's exactly what I've been trying to explain to the council for years. Maybe they'll finally believe it coming from an objective journalist." "I'm not sure any journalist is truly objective," Valera admitted, "but I'll do my best to convey the nuance of what I've witnessed here." "That's all we can ask," Parker said. She glanced toward where Razor Scale was conferring with a group of Vrexner officers. "We deploy to the Harvester Front in 12 hours. You should rest while you can." As Parker moved away, Valera found herself contemplating the title of the article she would write. "Humans took down the most dangerous predator with just one slap." Had a certain dramatic appeal, but it missed the deeper truth. Perhaps something like "the slap heard across the galaxy." How human instinct forged an unlikely alliance would better capture the reality. Or maybe, she thought as she watched Parker and Razor Scale once again side by side, discussing strategy with effortless synchronicity, the title should simply be "Evolution's Response," when predators recognize predators. In the 3 days that followed, the newly formed Integrated Species Response Force began to take shape. Additional council vessels arrived, bringing with them representatives from species that had historically maintained their distance from both humans and Vrexner. Valera documented each new arrival, fascinated by the gradual transformation of skepticism into cautious cooperation. Most revealing were the training exercises, where Parker and other human officers demonstrated the core principles of what had once been called the taming protocol. Valera observed as humans with no apparent physical advantages somehow managed to establish working relationships with species that could have killed them with minimal effort. "It's not about dominance," Parker explained during one such session. "It's about recognition. Each species has its own dominance and submission signals, its own pack or herd or hive dynamics. The key is identifying the underlying patterns and finding the common ground." The slap, one of the council military advisors noted, was one specific instance tailored to Vrexner psychology. Parker corrected. Other species required different approaches. The Morthari respond to rhythmic sounds, the Gastrani to specific pheromone patterns. The universal element isn't the gesture, but the understanding behind it. Valera watched as human specialists worked with representatives from a dozen different species, finding the unique keys that unlocked cooperative potential in each case. It wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings, occasional flare-ups of aggression, moments of confusion, but the progress was undeniable. Most striking was the response of the Vrexner themselves. Far from resenting their role as the original tamed species, they had embraced it with pride. Razor Scale's warriors served as living proof of the system's effectiveness, demonstrating battle techniques that combined their natural ferocity with human strategic precision. "They see themselves as pioneers," Lieutenant Hayes explained to Valera as they observed a mixed-species tactical drill. "The first to recognize humans as worthy pack leaders. It gives them status in the emerging force structure." "And the humans don't find that problematic?" Valera asked. "Being cast as pack leaders?" Hayes shrugged. "Most of us in the program don't see it that way. We're not leaders in the sense of being superior. We're more like translators or conductors, coordinating different instruments to create harmony for what would otherwise be chaos." This metaphor struck Valera as particularly apt as she watched the drills unfold. Each species brought its unique evolutionary advantages to the exercise: Vrexner's strength and aggression, Cynthian's sensory perception, Ellerin technological integration, human adaptability and coordination. Together, they achieved results that would have been impossible for any single species acting alone. On the eve of the task force's deployment to the Harvester Front, Valera secured a final interview with both Parker and Razor Scale. They met in the commander's quarters aboard the Intrepid, a space that reflected its occupant's practical nature, with few personal items beyond a small collection of ancient Earth books and a holographic display cycling through images of diverse landscapes. Commander Parker, Valera began. When you confronted Grashtak at Proxima Station, did you have any idea of the consequences that would follow from that moment? Parker smiled ruefully. None whatsoever. It was pure instinct, the kind of reaction any human might have when protecting their team. Ambassador Washington was vulnerable, and something just clicked. The Alpha Guardian response, Razor Scale added, using the human term with apparent comfort. A behavior pattern our scientists have since documented extensively in human neural activity. And you, Commander Scale, Valera turned to the Vrexner. What was your reaction when you witnessed this incident? The massive predator seemed to consider the question carefully. Initial confusion. Then, recognition. Your Commander Parker displayed challenge behaviors that matched our own dominance patterns with perfect precision, yet came from a physically inferior species. It violated all our evolutionary expectations. Cognitive dissonance, Parker translated. The Vrexner brain couldn't reconcile what it was seeing with what it expected, creating a moment of psychological openness. Yes, Razor Scale confirmed. In that moment of openness, we saw humans not as prey or competitors, but as potential pack allies with complementary abilities. It was illuminating. And from that illumination came the formal alliance, Valera prompted. Eventually, Parker acknowledged. There were many steps between that first recognition and the structured cooperation we have today. Many mistakes, many adjustments, many deaths. Razor Scale added solemnly. Not all Vrexner accepted the new understanding. Not all humans understood how to maintain the balance correctly. It's been a learning process on both sides, Parker agreed. And now we'll apply those lessons on a broader scale against the Harvesters. Do you believe you can win? Valera asked directly. The two commanders exchanged a glance that communicated volumes without words. If we fought as separate species, each with our own strategies and limitations? No, Parker said frankly. The Harvesters adapt too quickly, incorporate too efficiently. They would eventually identify and exploit the weaknesses unique to each council species. But together, Razor Scale continued. With each species compensating for the other's vulnerabilities? Yes, we can win. The Harvesters optimize through uniformity. We optimize through diversity. As the interview concluded, Valera found herself reflecting on how thoroughly her understanding of the situation had evolved. The simple, sensational story she had pursued had revealed itself to be something far more nuanced and profound. Not a tale of mysterious human abilities, but of evolutionary recognition across species boundaries. The announcement came as they were preparing to depart. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Harvester fleet advancing toward the heavily populated Meridian sector. The timeline for deployment accelerated dramatically, with the Integrated Species Response Force scrambling to intercept before the Harvesters could reach. Inhabited worlds. Valera found herself aboard the command vessel alongside Parker and Razor Scale as the joint fleet made the final jump into the contested region. The tactical displays showed a grim picture. The Harvester forces had grown substantially since the Cygnus engagement, incorporating elements that suggested they had successfully assimilated technology and biological material from several outposts along their path. They're adapting faster than we anticipated, Parker observed grimly. These new configurations weren't present at Cygnus. The hunt grows more challenging, Razor Scale replied, her predatory eyes narrowed as she studied the displays. Good. Worthy prey makes for stronger hunters. The battle that followed would later be described in Valera's account as a symphony of evolutionary advantages. Each species played to its strengths. Vrexner shock troops provided overwhelming force at critical junctures. Cynthian sensory specialists identified Harvester vulnerabilities. Ellerin technicians rapidly adapted council weapons to exploit those weaknesses, and humans coordinated it all, maintaining the complex web of interspecies communication that made such cooperation possible. From her position on the command deck, Valera documented everything: the tactical decisions, the moments of crisis, the instances of unexpected collaboration across species that had once been bitter enemies. Despite initial setbacks, the integrated force gradually gained the upper hand, driving the Harvester fleet back from the populated systems it had targeted. The turning point came during a particularly fierce engagement when a Harvester capital ship launched a direct assault on the Intrepid. Parker ordered an innovative countermeasure, a combined strike team of multiple species, each contributing their unique capabilities to penetrate the Harvester vessel's defenses. Valera watched the helmet feeds as Parker herself led the mission, with Razorscale at her side. The human commander's calm, precise directions blended seamlessly with the Vrexner's ferocious protection, creating a combination that seemed somehow greater than the sum of its parts. When Parker was briefly separated from the team and surrounded by Harvester drones, Razorscale's response was immediate and devastating, yet controlled with a precision that Vrexner warriors had rarely demonstrated before their alliance with humanity. By the time the operation concluded, the Harvester fleet had been forced into full retreat, their adaptive advantages insufficient against the diverse approaches of the unified Council forces. As the Intrepid returned to formation with the main fleet, the mood on the command deck was one of cautious optimism. "This isn't the end," Parker warned during the debriefing. "The Harvesters will analyze this defeat, adapt their strategies, return with new capabilities. But we've proven the concept of the integrated response. We've shown that interspecies cooperation can overcome even threats that target our biological differences." In the aftermath, as the Council officially recognized the success of the operation and authorized the permanent establishment of the Integrated Species Response Force, Valera found herself completing the article that would introduce the galaxy to this new paradigm of cooperation. She sat in her quarters aboard the Intrepid, reviewing her notes and recordings, searching for the right words to capture what she had witnessed. The easy headline, "Humans took down the most dangerous predator with just one slap," no longer seemed adequate. It reduced a complex evolutionary and psychological phenomenon to sensationalism. Instead, she began her piece with what she now understood to be the truth. The legendary slap approximation was not an ending, but a beginning. The first recognition that species separated by billions of years of evolution could find common ground in the language of instinct and mutual respect. As she wrote, Valera reflected on how her own perspective had evolved. She had come seeking a simple tale of human exceptionalism and discovered instead a story about transcending the boundaries of evolution itself. The true miracle wasn't that humans had somehow mystically tamed the galaxy's most dangerous predators. It was that both humans and Vrexner had recognized in each other the potential for something greater than either could achieve alone. Her final interview for the piece took place in the observation lounge, overlooking the fleet as it prepared to return to Council space. Parker and Razorscale stood side by side, their silhouettes, one human, one Vrexner, outlined against the stars. "What comes next?" Valera asked them. "Expansion of the integrated response protocols," Parker replied. "The Harvesters aren't defeated, just temporarily pushed back. We need to be ready when they return." "And beyond that," Valera pressed. "Beyond the immediate threat?" Razorscale turned, her predatory gaze toward the journalist. "Evolution never stops," she said simply. "What began with a slap continues with each new understanding between species that once would have only seen each other as threats or prey." "The Council was founded on principles of cooperation," Parker added. "But for too long, that cooperation remained superficial, diplomatic, economic, occasionally military. What we're doing now goes deeper. It's about recognizing that our evolutionary differences can be strengths rather than barriers. A new kind of galactic community," Valera suggested. "Perhaps," Parker acknowledged, "or perhaps just the natural next step in evolution itself. Not just the evolution of individual species, but of interspecies relationships." As Valera completed her article in the days that followed, she titled it, "Humans took down the most dangerous predator with just one slap, but it was only the beginning." The piece spread rapidly across Council space, challenging long-held assumptions about both humans and Vrexner. Some dismissed it as exaggeration or propaganda, but those who had witnessed the integrated force in action against the Harvesters knew better. A new model of interspecies cooperation had emerged, one based not on dominance or subjugation, but on the recognition of complementary evolutionary advantages. And it had all begun with a simple, instinctive gesture, a human officer protecting her team, a moment of evolutionary recognition across species boundaries, and the beginning of a partnership that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when ancient instincts were channeled toward cooperation rather than conflict. As Parker had explained in their final conversation, the slap wasn't magic. It wasn't even about the physical act itself. It was about speaking a language older than words, the language of predator and pack, of boundaries and respect. In that moment, we discovered that despite evolving on different worlds around different stars, some aspects of life's language are universal. We just needed to learn how to translate. In her conclusion, Valera wrote, "The legend of how humans took down the most dangerous predator with just one slap will likely persist, growing more mythologized with each retelling. But the truth, as I have witnessed firsthand, is both simpler and more profound. It wasn't about taking down or subduing. It was about recognition. Predator recognizing predator across the gulf of evolution, and finding in that recognition the possibility of something greater than either could achieve alone. As the harvester threat looms and the galaxy faces unprecedented challenges, perhaps this new understanding is exactly what we need, not the dominance of one species over another, but the harmonization of our evolutionary strengths and the transcendence of our biological limitations through mutual respect and cooperation. The slap that changed galactic history wasn't an act of conquest, but the first word in a conversation that continues to this day.